The world had been a canvas of cracked earth and faded gold for months. Every blade of grass was a memory, and the riverbeds lay like skeletal veins, waiting for a life they were not sure would ever return. It was the harshest dry season in memory, a time of silent suffering in the heart of Africa. But then, as it always does, the sky broke. The rains came not with a whisper, but with a roar, and in Ngorongoro Conservation Area, a place where all you knew was slowly turning to dust, was reborn. The land drank greedily, and in a matter of days, the impossible happened. Streams swelled into thundering rivers, and the parched earth erupted in a carpet of vibrant green. It was a rebirth, a sacred promise kept by the heavens. In this world of liquid light and new life lived Brian, a ranger whose life was woven into the very fabric of this wilderness. And with him lived a legend. Brian was a magnificent male lion, his mane a deep, rich gold, but his heart was not like others. As a cub, he had been orphaned and left for dead. Brian, finding him barely clinging to life, had done what was unthinkable in this wild world. He had saved him. He had raised Orion, teaching him not just to survive, but to know compassion. The bond between them was not one of master and beast, but of two souls connected by a single, powerful act of love. In this new, vibrant world, their peace was a tranquil counterpoint to the wild energy around them. It was here, in a verdant valley, that another new life was struggling to find its footing. Koba, a young gorilla, small and alone, navigating a world that had just been remade. The promise of the rains turned brutal. The gentle drizzle became a relentless, pounding deluge. The air thrummed with the sound of water, and the river near Orion's den, once a gentle stream, was now a churning monster of mud and spray. It was a force of nature so immense it terrified even the bravest creatures. Orion had always held a deep, unexplainable fear of water, a primal aversion that kept him far from its banks. He watched the river with a cautious reverence, a line he would never cross. In a small clearing not far from the rushing water, Koba was exploring with a child's boundless curiosity. He swung from a liana that was slick with rain, his small hands gripping tight. But the vine, weakened by the relentless downpour, gave way. Koba tumbled, a tiny, dark blur against the emerald green, and landed with a desperate splash in the fast-moving river. The current seized him instantly, pulling him under. He resurfaced, a gasp of terror escaping his lips before being dragged under again. From his vantage point on the high bank, Orion saw it all. His body stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Instinct screamed at him to turn away, to retreat to the safety of the dry land. The rushing water was a primal threat, a force he was built to avoid. But then, a memory, soft and powerful, flickered in his mind. The gentle hands of Brian, the loving gaze, the quiet trust. That memory, that human connection, was a force stronger than instinct. It was the silent voice that reminded him of a different way of being, a way of courage born not of ferocity, but of love. He stood for a moment, a magnificent statue of internal conflict. His muscles trembled with the effort of pushing past his deepest fear. Then, with a roar that was more defiance than challenge, he moved. He took a running leap from the bank, his powerful body cutting through the air, and hit the raging water with a tremendous splash. The shock of the cold, muddy torrent was immense. He fought against the current, every ounce of his power focused on staying afloat and moving forward. The water pulled at him, seeking to drag him under, but he kept his head above the spray, his eyes locked on the small, struggling gorilla. He was no longer just a lion. He was a lifeline. It was a battle of will. Orion fought for every inch, his massive paws churning the water. He was a creature of the land, yet here he was, in the heart of his enemy, driven by a force that made no sense to his wild brethren. He finally reached Koba, grabbing the young gorilla gently in his jaws, and began the brutal swim back to shore. Just as he pulled the exhausted gorilla from the torrent and onto the muddy bank, a shadow fell over them. A growl, low and menacing, echoed through the trees. The shadow belonged to his second lion, a wild male with a scarred face and a glint of hunger in his eyes. He saw not a gorilla, but a meal, easy prey, weakened and helpless. He stalked forward, his tail lashing, his eyes fixed on Koba. This was not a test of courage. It was a battle of ideologies. Orion stood over Koba, his body a shield, his powerful muscles coiled and ready. He let out a deep, chest-shaking roar, not a challenge for territory, but a proclamation of a new, sacred law. That compassion was a force more powerful than instinct. The wild lion was confused. This was not the behavior of a dominant male. It was an act of protection, of self-sacrifice. He circled, perplexed, but the scent of prey was strong, and his hunger was a force he could not ignore. The fight began. It was a chaotic, furious dance of claws and teeth, of earth-shaking roars and furious lunges. Orion fought with a ferocity he had never shown before, not for dominance, but for a life that was not his own. His heart, shaped by Brian's love, had become a forge of unyielding will. He was faster, more focused, and driven by a purpose the wild lion could not comprehend. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the tree line, Brian. He saw the two lions locked in mortal combat, and his heart ached, but he held back. He had a gun, a final recourse, but he had faith in Orion. He knew the lion he had raised was not just a beast of raw power. He was an embodiment of a new kind of strength. Brian stood, a silent guardian, a testament to the trust that had forged this incredible bond. He would only intervene if absolutely necessary, but he knew, deep in his soul, that Orion would not fail. The fight reached its climax. Orion, with a final, desperate surge of power, pinned the wild lion to the ground. He did not go for the kill. Instead, he let out a guttural roar, a command to retreat. The scarred lion, a creature of pure instinct, was defeated by a force he had never encountered. He saw the unblinking, determined look in Orion's eyes, a look that spoke of a bond and a love that defied the very laws of the wild. He scrambled to his feet, wounded and bewildered, and disappeared back into the undergrowth, leaving Orion standing tall over his charge. With the danger past, the air itself seemed to sigh with relief. Brian rushed forward, not to praise Orion, but to carefully tend to the little gorilla. Koba was dazed and weak, his small body bruised and scraped from the terrifying journey. Brian carefully wrapped him in a blanket and carried him back to his small, peaceful camp. The days that followed were a testament to quiet heroism. Koba received expert medical care, his small, fragile body slowly healing. Brian fed him, soothed him, and helped him regain his strength. The camp became a sanctuary. In this quiet space, Koba's personality began to emerge. He was playful and curious, his big, brown eyes full of a wisdom that belied his age. He learned to climb the small trees around the camp, to forage for berries, and to trust the kind hands of his human rescuer. And through it all, Orion remained a constant, silent presence. He would lie on a rocky outcrop overlooking the camp, his golden eyes watching Koba. He was not just a lion. He was a sentinel, a guardian angel with a magnificent mane. The bond between the three of them was a silent, powerful thread that transcended their species. Orion's presence was a living reminder of the courage and love that had saved Koba. It was a visual metaphor for the incredible things that could happen when a creature of pure instinct chose to follow its heart. Koba's rehabilitation was a gentle, beautiful process. He grew stronger, his fur grew thicker, and his movements became more confident. He was learning to be a gorilla again, not just surviving, but thriving. The time for Koba's return arrived. He was strong, healthy, and ready to be with his own kind. The journey was somber, a silent farewell. Brian, with Orion walking faithfully by his side, led Koba deep into the jungle, towards the familiar, guttural calls of a gorilla troop. As they approached, the calls became louder, more distinct. Koba, hearing the familiar sounds of his family, hesitated for a moment, then took off at a run, his small body disappearing into the thick canopy. Brian and Orion stood there for a long moment, watching the small gorilla reunite with his family. The troop's silverback, a massive, powerful creature, stepped forward. He watched Brian and Orion intently, a silent communication passing between them. Then, in an act that left Brian in awe, the silverback thumped his chest, a deep, resonant sound of respect, not of dominance. The rest of the troop followed suit, a rhythmic symphony of appreciation for the strange pair who had returned one of their own. Orion, his golden mane wet from the jungle mist, raised his head and let out a mighty roar. It was not a roar of challenge, nor a battle cry, but a powerful, guttural declaration of kinship, an acknowledgement of a shared spirit. The sound mingled with the chest beating of the gorillas, a sacred chorus that echoed through the trees. The story of Orion, the lion with a compassionate heart, began to spread through the land, a whispered legend of a creature who chose love over instinct. Brian and Orion stood together, a man and a lion, on the vast, rain-swept plains of Ngorongoro, two beings who had defied the natural order, proving that even in the wild, love could not only survive, but thrive, becoming the most powerful force of all. If this story touched you, like and subscribe to our channel for more tales of unbelievable kindness in the animal kingdom. And let us know in the comments below, what's a moment of unexpected kindness that has changed your life?